Welcome everyone. Welcome to NETROOTS Nation at Home, our 15th conference, and we're doing it all at home. Now, usually when I begin, when I have the opportunity to begin welcoming you to stage, I'll do something like, all right, well, who's been here for 10 years and 5 years and who's new? Maybe it's partially because I like to give the opportunity for us old timers to brag about it a little bit. But I also am so excited and so motivated by seeing how many new people join us every year. Well, this year's different. This year's NETROOTS Nation at Home. And in a way, for all of us, this is our first time here. My name is Arshad Hassan. I'm a longtime board member, former or immediate past chair. I'm the principal and co-founder of Convey Communications, and I'm a NETROOTS Nation newbie for NETROOTS Nation at Home. I want you to imagine back in the darkest time of the pandemic, how the board and the staff were coming together and thinking about, well, how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? Will there even be a NETROOTS Nation this year? And if you can imagine those conversations, you can imagine the staff thinking about it, one thing came clear to all of us, that somehow, some way, we had to find a way to come together. Not just because I need to see you, and I do need to see you. You are my political family, my professional family, and in many cases, my family of choice. But also because this moment is just too important for us not to come together. At these conferences, we come together to not just socialize, but to learn from each other, to conspire together, to commiserate together, to be together, to learn different ways of being and to really increase our connectivity within the movement around the country and even around the world. And right now, at this moment, there is so much energy. I'm not just talking about at the conference, I know it's weird, but I'm talking about around this country. I'm talking about on the streets. I'm talking about at the ballot box already. And I'm talking about the energy that just sort of underlies this tense but powerful moment in the movement. I think that this year is not just about defeating Trump, although that is important. I think it is about defeating Trumpism, which to me, I know it's nothing new, but when I think about Trumpism, I think about it as the electoral weaponizing of this country's worst foundational sins. We're all in the middle of history, not just observers, but as makers of that history. And we here at this conference and on this stage, we are the ones who have the power to change the direction of this country to somewhere different than where it is now, somewhere better. We're not going back to what it was. We're building something more. So let me break it down in terms of what we'll be doing at this conference day by day. So today, Thursday, we are going to be talking about the election, this year, 2020, how we'll win it and what it means for us. Friday, from the stage, we'll be talking about building power, turning those wins into policy. And then on Saturday, we go even bigger picture. We talk about the long game. We talk about dismantling oppression and in its place, building a just, equitable society. So listen, I wish that we were here in person. If we were, we'd all be in Denver, Colorado, one of my favorite cities. And I have to say, I was really plugging for Colorado this year. But since we can't be physically, all of us, together in Colorado, we thought we'd bring somebody special from Colorado. I want to introduce to the stage Representative Joe Neguse, Congressman from Colorado. Hi, Joe.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to NETROOTS Nation. I'll let you take it away from here.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for inviting me and welcome everyone to NETROOTS Nation. This year's of course, event is a little bit different than most. I am very grateful to the incredible team of organizers who made this event possible. I know, as Arshad mentioned, that this year's convention was supposed to be here in Denver, Colorado. And so let me extend first a virtual welcome from our great state, because I am here live in Boulder County, Colorado. And while I'm sad that we're not going to get to share our beautiful mountains or our world famous craft beer with you all, thrilled to be able to at least join you virtually. I will just start with this, which I suspect that every single person who's watching is fully aware of. We are in an existential moment. The election this November is critical, And really nothing could be more important. Your investments, your passion, your commitment, your dedication right now is crucial. And I am so grateful that as we approach this consequential moment for our country, that we have the power of the organizers and activists here today, the grassroots strength and the progressive coalition that Netroots Nation has literally built from the ground up over the course of the last 15 years. What I know for sure is that the stakes are too high this November, and we cannot risk anyone sitting out. As we kind of just set the table, it's important to take a step back and recognize where we are. 5 million positive cases of coronavirus in the United States. Over 160,000 American lives lost. 16 million people out of work. Folks struggling to be able to put food on the table. Neighbors, family, friends, colleagues, fellow community members. And while all of that is happening, we're seeing a complete and wholesale vacuum of leadership at the federal level, and in particular in the White House. So when I say that the health of our communities, the lives and the livelihoods of millions of Americans are at stake, you know that I mean it. And as was mentioned at the top of the hour, equality and justice are at stake as well. We are truly in a fight for the soul of our nation. I know that many folks have said that, but it remains true. This November really will determine the path forward as we fight to address systemic inequities ingrained in our system and forge on towards a more perfect, more just, and more fair union. And not only that, and let me tell you, as a member of the House Judiciary Committee, our very democracy, our republic, is at stake. Our elections are undermined and challenged today like they never have been before. As more and more Americans are relying on mail-in ballots to protect themselves and protect their families and help stop the spread of the virus, the Postal Service is being undermined on a daily basis, mismanaged, left without needed resources to survive. Just this morning, the President of the United States admitted on national television that he was intentionally, deliberately sabotaging the Postal Service to prevent citizens from being able to vote by mail in the middle of a pandemic. So voter suppression is alive and well, and the spread of misinformation about mail-in voting coming from the very top, the widespread disinformation left unchecked across our social media platforms, literally the president calling into question the very results of an election still months away. Clearly, a lot is on the line. But even amidst all the chaos and the corruption and the callousness, I will also confess to you that I see hope for our future. And I see that hope in individuals like yourselves across our country who are continuing to fight. And I am here today to tell you that change is possible. As the son of African immigrants, my folks fled to East Africa as refugees over 40 years ago. I am not your typical congressman. When I was elected in 2018, together here in Colorado, we made history, sending the first African American to the United States Congress to represent Colorado in our state's history. And now I serve as the youngest African American male in the United States House of Representatives and the youngest member at the Democratic leadership table. And of course, we're poised to make history again this November when Mondaire Jones becomes the youngest African American serving in the United States House of Representatives, and when soon-to-be Representative-elect Bowman joins the Congress to shake up the status quo. My folks, my parents worked incredibly hard to give me and my sister the ability to be able to pursue our dreams, and they instilled in us that we couldn't take for granted the opportunities that we have in this country. And now their belief in the American dream, their belief in the promise of America, I can pass on to my young daughter, Natalie, who turns 2 in just a week and a half. And so even in this consequential moment, and as I said, amidst the fear and the division and every effort over the last 4 years to tear us apart and to divide us and suppress us, my belief in the promise of America has stood strong. And as our democratic institutions have been under threat, as the integrity of our elections and our Constitution is attacked, their purpose and their power hold even more weight. Now, truth be told, there have been a lot of fights in the House of Representatives over the course of this last 2 years. But I have been so heartened to know that Netroots Nation, that many of you have our back, that in every one of those fights, we have your activism, your policies, and your voices joining in and reminding the nation that the promise of America is worth fighting for and that real transformational change is possible. But we know at the end of the day that we have to do it together. When we organize together, when we march together, when our passion and our voices are tangled up together in one united voice for change and progress, we can overcome anything, including the political divisiveness and the morality breakdown, the corruption that we're seeing from the top leadership in our country right now. So the question for all of us, including myself, right, is how we take the urgency and the momentum of this political moment to the polls in November. And in my view, it's simple. It's following the footsteps of the giants and the heroes who have paved the way, who have walked similarly difficult and consequential roads in our country's history to save the soul and shape of our nation. By leading with love and compassion, by bringing people to our table, meeting them where they are, and continuing to reject the culture of fear and divisiveness that has become all too prevalent. A few weeks ago, I had the honor of joining many of my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus to travel to Atlanta, Georgia, and say goodbye to a friend, a mentor, a giant among giants, a true American hero, Mr. John Lewis. John Lewis was a civil rights legend who led with his life, his words, his actions. He was the kindest man that I had ever met, and his commitment to love and nonviolence was not shattered for anything. And I can remember just 2 weeks ago sitting in the pews at Ebenezer Baptist Church and listening to President Obama say so eloquently that John Lewis will be a founding father of that fuller, fairer, better America. That, to me, is what it's all about. And so it's our turn. It's our turn to make that promise a reality, because there's a lot more work to be done. The work that Mr. Lewis began, that he committed his life towards is now before us, and it's up to us as a nation to continue getting into good trouble and realizing the dream that John Lewis had. And of course, it runs the gamut, but it includes, in my view, strengthening the Voting Rights Act, which we'll be able to do, as I said, once Mondaire and Jamal and so many others join us come this November after the election. By fulfilling Mr. Lewis's legacy, by fulfilling the American promise with substantive policy change, and also by mobilizing voters this November, by driving more participation, we can make those dreams a reality. Mr. Lewis said in his final letter that the vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent that you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. Those words are so prescient as we consider even the developments of the last 24 hours. So I hope that each and every one of you are committed to doing everything that you can to fulfilling that legacy, fulfilling that promise, denying this president a second term, and turning out this November like we never have before. We're counting on you. Our republic is counting on you. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to join you today. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay hopeful.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you for joining us. Next, I want to welcome up on the stage one of our best strategic thinkers. Here's the thing, and we know this at NETROOTS Nation. In order to build power, in order to make change, sometimes we have to upset some established norms. We have to change what Americans expect is possible. And I think in a way that's some of the most beautiful work that we can do. But it also is difficult work that's often met with skepticism. But what we do, the way we build power, is we want to be bold, because we need to be progressive. And so we have to overturn the assumption that to be safe is to be cautious, reactionary, centrist. We're not here, all of us here at NETROOTS Nation. Many of us are Democrats, but we're not here because we're some arm of the Democratic Party. Our analysis isn't confined to the letter that's next to the name of the person we intend to vote for. We have a much broader analysis. And we know that we have to be bold and we have to challenge even those who share our party. And so we come together and we build together. And the person I want to introduce here, Mo Mitchell, next. Maurice is the executive director of Working Families Party. They're some of the smartest strategists out there, but they're not just similar thinking. They're knocking on doors when we could do that. They're calling, they're building networks and building relationships. In short, they're building power. and enough power to upset and overturn some of the existing power structures which have not served us well. Maurice is going to bring up three amazing fighters, people who themselves have overturned expectations, have beat the establishment, if you like it, and are now going to be members or coming back to be elected representatives. Mo, come on up.
Great. Thank you so much, Arshad. And I have such a great pleasure to be representing the Working Families Party. And, I'm honored to be on this stage with NETROOTS Nation. It's an incredible community that we're now sort of engaging with virtually, but I still feel the power and connection that NETROOTS Nation is known to bring and to allow our very broad, very diverse, progressive community to engage in. So really grateful for all the work that you do. So it's also a true honor to be here with some of the brightest stars of an emerging new class of unapologetically Black, unapologetically progressive candidates and elected leaders. The Working Families Party aspires to be the electoral engine of social movements, taking the energy in the streets and channeling it to the ballot box. We are so proud to support each of your campaigns this year. And we're so proud that we could call you Working Families Democrats. In fact, you're exactly the kinds of leaders I want the WFP to elect and partner with at every level of government in every region of the country. So I want to start off with a question for everyone. So your politics, your campaigns, your policy platforms, so much of it was informed by social movements, from the movement for Black lives to the broader movements for economic and social justice. I'm interested in what you think of the idea of co-governance, where elected leaders work hand in hand with social movements and activists in their communities to make change.
I'll start. Because we don't know what the order is, but thank you. It's so good to be here with everybody. I'm Summer Lee. I just got reelected Pennsylvania State House. And I can say without a shadow of doubt that co-governance has been one of our kind of driving forces and kind of our values that we share and that we spread in my region. I'm in Pittsburgh and in Western Pennsylvania. So when I think about co-governance and the importance of it, I'm thinking about what our government is going to look like after our movement has had the sweeping successes that we're going to continue to have. We're going to continue to build. It's really at its core, how do we harness the power of the people in a real way, not in a rhetorical way? That the power to the people is just a saying, but really embodying that, really bringing that to our engagement, to the way that we're re-enfranchising new folks and expanding the electorate. How do we bring in and center working people, working class folks, poor folks, marginalized folks? How are we ensuring that those people who are closest to issues, but maybe not closest to government right now, maybe not closest to the levers of power, how are we ensuring that we're bringing them to the levers of power, but really that we're bringing the levers of power straight to them? So I feel like that's where we derive our, not just our power, but our strength, is where we build our movement. So co-governing has to exist because even as we're making these big decisions, we don't have any right as elected leaders to pretend that we know more, that we're better, that we're smarter. We might have different information, but these folks who are going through it, they understand this work. They understand the solutions. They know the path in the society they want to build, and they have an inherent right to be a part of building that. We're just the tip of their spear. We're just a tool, but we're not, rulers here.
Thanks so much, Summer. Mandir or Jamal, please share some of your assessments.
Sure. First of all, I'm so pleased to be here. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Mandir Jones. I'm the Democratic nominee in New York's 17th Congressional District. And when I think about co-governance, I think about something that has always been a principle for me, which is that any elected official, that power derives from the people. And so that connection doesn't just evaporate when the person takes office, as I hope to be doing in just a few months from now, along with my friend Jamal Bowman. And it has to be a continuation of running for office, where you have grassroots organizers applying pressure, getting the word out, making sure that issues are salient. Some of the things that I ran on were, saving the world from climate catastrophe, right? So a Green New Deal, Medicare for all, student debt forgiveness. These are things that we are going to continue to need grassroots organizers to help us out with as legislators in the United States Congress, for example. because we know that we are about to elect a new president and a vice president who we are not always going to agree on things with. And we're going to be to the left of those individuals on any number of issues. And so we are going to need the help of any and everyone of good conscience who's going to be able to make sure that we build this national political pressure to push people to the left so that they are more in line with the best interests of the American people.
Great. Thanks. Jamal.
Yeah, I'll just add, first of all, what's up, Maurice? Great to see you, brother, as always. What's up, Mandir? Summer, it's a pleasure to meet you. I look forward to meeting you in person. I mean, the bottom line is it's our job to serve the people. I mean, we didn't run for office for ourselves to get to Congress and do work for ourselves to only meet the needs of what we believe should happen in the communities. Where we ran to serve the people. And to quote Ayanna Presley, those who are closest to the pain need to be closest to the power. So the people who are dealing with housing insecurity, the people who are dealing with food insecurity, the ones going to underfunded schools, the ones who are uninsured and underinsured, the ones struggling to find jobs, those are the people we are serving. So we have to listen to them. We have to govern with them. And if my policies don't work in alignment with what the people are saying, then I'm not doing my job. If I'm not open to the feedback from the people in my district, then I'm not doing my job, and it's their job to vote me out of office. In terms of the grassroots organizations that have supported our campaign and support NETROOTS and support all of our work, they have been on the front lines fighting for the issues that matter most to all of us for decades. So in terms of an expertise regarding a particular issue, it's their expertise which will also inform the policies that I support, that we all support. So co-governance is how a democracy is supposed to work. It is how America is supposed to work. Unfortunately, we've had a corporate elite that has co-opted our political system since the beginning, since the inception of this country, but definitely over the last 40 years. I mean, they have gone buck wild. And now it's time for us to take it back. And this is our moment to take it back. So co-governance and really uplifting the power and the voices of the people, that matters more than anything else.
Great. And let's stick with you, Jamal, for the second question. Now, for those of you that might not know, Jamal is both a student and teacher of history. And so it's no surprise that you've centered your agenda for Black Americans around the idea of Reconstruction. Now, what's your vision for Reconstruction and how can it help us end white supremacy?
Right. So America has been reconstructing itself from the very beginning, right? From the Revolutionary War to the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement to the Industrial Revolution, right? America has been reconstructing and rebuilding itself. The problem is Black folk have been left out of that equation, right? So when we talk about our freedom, the passage of the 13th Amendment and our freedom, where we were supposed to receive 40 acres, that never happened. Instead, as we moved out west, the Homestead Act was passed and millions of acres were given to white folk, both native and foreign born. So we were left out of that equation. So Reconstruction failed us regarding step one. Step two, after the Civil Rights Movement, which was an incredible movement, we passed the Voting Rights Act, passed the Civil Rights Act, did incredible work there. What happened after that movement, right? We had mass incarceration, and we had a war on drugs that targeted Black and brown communities that disproportionately landed us in prison. And in between, we've been dealing with white terror, literally terrorist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, and white terror in terms of policy, like the GI Bill and redlining and things that kept us out of building wealth. So we tried Reconstruction 2 times before, and it did not work. Black folk, indigenous folk, people of color were kept out of it. Hopefully, third time will be a charm as we engage in this moment where we're literally dealing with the Spanish flu, the Great Depression, and the Civil Rights Movement all at the same time. This is a chance for us to rebuild America. This is a chance for us to rebuild our nation in the image of our beautiful strength and our beautiful diversity. The problem is if we don't go through a period of truth and reconciliation and a true reckoning with our history, we will never be able to heal as a country and properly move forward in our greatest strength. We have not gone through the healing. So the Reconstruction agenda that we are introducing is a process of truth and reconciliation, similar to Germany, similar to Rwanda, similar to South Africa. Let's reckon with our history and go through a process of healing. As we go through that process and we reflect on our ugly legacy of racism and slavery, we then hopefully make a paradigm shift and invest massively reparations in communities that have been ignored so that the people in those communities can rebuild their communities in their own image. It's a process of shifting resources from our bloated military industrial complex, our bloated police departments, and Wall Street into the people in our communities that are creative, that are brilliant, that are genius, and allow them to rebuild their housing, their healthcare infrastructure, their schools, jobs, and everything that we know really truly centers public health. And it is our job as a federal government to get this done. And the last thing I want to say is this. This is our moment. This is our moment. We cannot waste this moment. We cannot waste a second. This is our moment to rebuild the nation into what we know it's capable of becoming. And it's not just about this moment in this country. This is a global movement and a global initiative where we're going to uplift poor Black and brown people all over the world, and we're going to leverage America's power as a humanitarian leader. This is our moment to beat Trump. This is our moment to flip the Senate, and we have to get the right Democrats in office, both at the federal, state, city, county, and school board level. And we got to continue to organize every single day of our lives, because the Republicans and the white supremacists, they are organizing every single day of their lives to make sure that none of us become uplifted. So it's our job to organize in that way, in this moment, to make sure we transform the country and transform the world. And I can't tell you how excited I am to have my dad riding with me, to have Summer riding with me, and I'm riding with her, to have Maurice and Working Families Party like it's on. NETROOTS is in the building. Let's go. I'm so excited.
All right. Spoken like a true BX native. I'm waiting for you to drop the mixtape. Oh man. So let's move to you, Summer. And also you reminded me why you are Congressman-elect, because you bring that fire. So Summer, let's go to you. And I want to talk particularly about your race, because I think your race for Black progressives is so fascinating. For Black women, it's so instructive. For this transformational energy that we're building, where new and young people who are committed to structural change, when we get into office and we're insurgents, what happens? So, you went up against the establishment now twice. The first time in 2018, you and Sarah Enamorado helped bring down a Pittsburgh political dynasty, right? Now, the second time the machine struck back. So can you tell me about your experience and what it means for Black progressives?
Yeah, certainly. It's definitely been an experience. Just to kind of like dovetail off of Brother Bowman there, we have to really recognize that there are folks who have a vested interest in us going back to that normal that they keep talking about, and building Black political, power and Black political and progressive empowerment is certainly something that's an impediment to that. And we saw it, live right here on the ground in my race. And I'm certain that it was many races like it, just as a Black woman and just as an incumbent who's been here now for a year and a half, the first thing that we were indoctrinated with is that, we don't touch our incumbents. We don't run against each other. We didn't even like the primary incumbents. But look, when I ran again, when my time came up to start, running again, my primary opponent was already out by the time we were like 4 months into me even existing, I don't even know how I could have messed up, in that short amount of time, but they were there. And he got traction and he got support from, big name folks in the party. And when it came down to it, I was the only incumbent to not get the endorsement of the Democratic Party. I was the only incumbent to not get the endorsement of the AFL-CIO. And even now that I have no opponent in November, I still don't have the endorsement of the state council with the AFL-CIO. And that really speaks directly to kind of this unapologetic Blackness that we have here, to that unapologetic progressiveness, to that unapologetic, we're here for poor and working class people, we're here for marginalized people, we're here to empower those folks. We're here to organize those folks. We're here to take back what's ours. And, we're not going to apologize for that. We're here to press an agenda that is people-centered. And the urgency that we have here, it startles some folks. Because when you're accustomed to being able to operate in the ways in which, our system, our political system, and because our economic system, the ways in which they've operated, they're not accustomed to folks who are bold and loud and not powerful in and of themselves, and recognizing of that. Not here because we want to build power or self-aggrandize, here because we genuinely and truly believe in the power of these people, believe in the power of our people. So I used to say often, that they're not attacking me, they're attacking you. They're attacking your potential. They're attacking us. They're attacking our movement. They're trying to stop and stymie our movement. And that's what we were able to focus on, how we run a grassroots campaign that doesn't get distracted, not even by, a global pandemic, that can't be distracted by negative mailers from your party, that can't be distracted by any of those things, because we know the society that we're building is worth fighting for, even when it seems distant, even when we're being attacked every step of the way, even when everything is up against us. So that was kind of what we had to deal with. I certainly hope I don't have to do this anymore, but I imagine that, again, these systems were not built overnight. They're not going to be dismantled overnight. So they know that we're coming. They see us building. They see that we're getting new folks coming in, that we're getting new Black progressives coming in. That shows them they're going to definitely get hip to our game. So I expect that the attacks will keep coming, but I know that our movement will keep building in real time.
That's right. And, they say it takes a nation of millions to hold us back. And I know the next time you run, I know at least there's two sitting Congress people who will quickly endorse you.
I'm gonna call them,
Two working families Democrats in Congress that will have your back. So that's what it's all about, building that movement. So we support one another, we show up for one another, and when the empire strikes back, we strike back harder. So, Mondeer, we are weeks away now from the most important election of our lifetime. I know people say that all the time, but I think it tends to be true every time we say it, and it certainly is true this election. And the Democratic presidential ticket isn't offering necessarily the type of bold transformational vision that you and the rest of the folks on this panel are offering. I mean, I could say that as somebody, like just this morning, WFP endorsed the ticket. Not because we agree on everything. In fact, we have deep disagreements, but because we understand the threat in the White House and what's on the ballot. So talk to me a little bit about what it means to folks in your communities or to the people around the country that are inspired by you, that feel that enthusiasm around your campaign and what's on the ballot in November.
Everything is up for grabs in November. And one thing that I have been constantly reminding people of in the course of my own campaign, especially in recent months and weeks, is that, for many of us, in fact, I would say probably for most progressives, this nominee of the Democratic Party was not the person who was our first choice. In many instances, he wasn't our second, third, or fourth choice. But there is no threat to everything that we stand for as progressives more dangerous, more powerful than Donald Trump continuing to be in the Oval Office. My sister in action, Representative Ayanna Pressley, calls him the occupant of the Oval Office. And I think that's the appropriate way to describe him. I don't want to call him the president I would like to think of any number of other folks as my president before a white supremacist who is at the helm, the most powerful person in the world. And so I'll be phone banking for Joe Biden and asking the people, the hundreds of folks who phone bank for me in the course of my campaign to do the same tonight and for Kamala Harris. But make no mistake, that does not mean that come January of 2021, folks like Jamal Bowman and myself and Summer and others won't be working mightily to make sure, number one, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are held accountable for the things that they said they would do over the course of this year-long presidential campaign. But more than that, are applying the kind of pressure, using strategic leverage and hopefully in a co-government fashion, co-governance fashion, as you spoke to earlier, Maurice, making sure that, on issues like climate, for example, that we are acting more urgently and more ambitiously to save the planet and ensure a livable future for ourselves and for the people who come after us, that we are doing something serious about forgiving student debt so that we can liberate an entire generation of young people to meaningfully participate in this economy so they don't have to live at home with their parents and their grandparents because they've been crippled by student debt, even as wages have remained stagnant over the past several decades. That we are doing something meaningful. And for me, that means Medicare for all when it comes to the healthcare crisis that we're experiencing. We're living in a time where a majority of the American people support Medicare for all. It is shameful to me that the Democratic platform does not include that, that the Democratic platform rejected the legalization of marijuana as something that really should not be controversial anymore, especially given what we've seen in our so-called criminal justice system, which I call a criminal legal system, the incarceration of so many Black and brown people, deliberately, intentionally, a relic of Jim Crow. If you ask Michelle Alexander, who really penned that seminal work, right, the new Jim Crow. And so we can't take anything for granted. We can't take for granted the fact that our nominees are going to govern in the way that we would want them to. And it's why it's so important that we exercise, if we're in Congress, our Article I authorities. One thing that we've gotten away from right now in recent years is the fact that Congress really should be the most powerful aspect of our federal government. It's why it's in Article I. It's why the framers put it in Article I, because they thought that Congress should be most powerful. But instead, we've had an executive that has way too much power. So as a progressive, soon to be progressive in Congress, we need to be acting as a block. That means everybody in the Congressional Progressive Caucus needs to get their act together and withhold their support from legislation that should be better for the American people. It means that folks who self-describe as progressives in Congress have to start legislating like that. And if not, then grassroots organizers need to hold them accountable. And I agree with my brother Jamal Bowman earlier when he said that we need to elect better Democrats. It is not enough to have the letter D next to your name. I just got done running in a crowded 8-person Democratic primary. Now, one person dropped out by the end. And so we were in a situation where I was the only person supporting Medicare for all, the only policy that would literally ensure everybody has health care in the midst of a global pandemic that people are comparing to the 1918 Spanish flu and that disproportionately has harmed Black and Hispanic communities in our society. With my own member of Congress, for all the disagreements that I may have had with her that led me to do a primary challenge before she had announced her retirement last fall, even she agreed with Medicare for all. And so we have really got to elect better people to Congress and at all levels of government. And I'm so grateful to the WFP for being part of that. And I invite other people to make sure that we hold Democrats accountable in the same way that we, of course, have to be holding Republicans accountable, because not all Democrats are made the same.
Thank you, Brother Mondier. That couldn't be more true. And, I think one of the things that I appreciate about that is, like, as you enter Congress, you're not just, changing the complexion of Congress, you're changing the direction of Congress, right? And so representation is important to all of us as Black folks, but values is as important. And the values and progressive stance that our elected officials take are what determines whether or not the Black community have elected officials that are actually committed to a Black agenda, right? And have working people actually committed to a working people's agenda. So I know we have 3 minutes left. So this is a lightning round, right? And in our 3 minutes, I would just love to hear from you. So imagine we're in a time machine. We take off, and we've won. Electorally, we've defeated the white supremacist and the occupant of the White House and all of his enablers in the federal government all the way down. We flipped the Senate. It means that in January 2021, progressives could actually govern. It means in state houses, like in the state house in Pennsylvania, there's a new mandate for progressive change. Let us know, what do Black progressives do? What is the unique role for Black progressive leaders in that moment? Let's start with Summer.
Yeah, I personally think that, when we win, when we are able to flip houses, state houses, the federal government, it makes a lot of difference. And I know that a lot of folks aren't seeing kind of that bigger picture, but as somebody who's in it with a Republican held majority right now, but also in a moment that is so inescapably Black, this is a Black moment. Whether we're talking about COVID-19 or we're talking about police violence or we're talking about systemic racism, this is a very Black moment. And it's time that, those are reflected, those issues, those concerns, or those struggles are reflected in our governance. When we flip these houses, what we then get to do is set the agenda. We get to set the messaging. We get to start to navigate and steer the ship a little bit. At no point are we ever going to have all the power, but I can assure you that I'm going to have an easier time, and we're all going to have easier times pushing some of those Democrats who we find problematic than pushing some of those overt white supremacists who don't even believe that they need to come to us or talk to us or come to our marches. Those aren't the folks who even feel like we need to have a say in any of this. So I think it's so important that we recognize how important it is that we set an agenda right now. As we're talking about building a new world coming out of COVID, not going back to normal, as we're talking about Medicare for all and workers' rights and family leave, paid and family leave time, and educational equity and cultural responsibility. Those are all things that only we can lead on, that only our voices can help to direct that ship. And we need to do it with more power at the speaker's desk, the speaker's rostrums all across this nation.
Thank you, Mandir.
Yeah, I love that this is a Black moment, and we have to extend that moment to permanence because we know that when Black people are allowed to lead, that is beneficial to all Americans. Because as my sister in action, Ayanna Pressley, says, the people closest to the pain must be closest to the power. And what I said over the course of my primary campaign is that when we have more people in office for whom policy is personal, we get better policy outcomes. People can be trusted to always fight in the best interest of the people who they are elected to represent when they are not corrupted by privilege and wealth and corporate influence and white supremacy, and you name it. And so I'm really excited about this moment. I see it in my district, which is largely white and affluent. I'm going to be representing the 19th most affluent congressional district in all the United States of America. And I ran on a bold progressive platform in the suburbs of New York City and Westchester and Rockland counties. And what I've heard from my future constituents is that they want me to show leadership on issues of systemic racism in our society, which, for the record, extends well beyond individual examples with police to include the way that we fund our public schools in this country. A property tax-based system that Jamal could speak really at length about, that results in the concentration of tens of billions of dollars in white communities and in the deprivation of Black and brown kids of critical educational opportunities. It's a healthcare system that conditions your ability to get necessary medical care on what you can afford to pay, disproportionately harming Black and Hispanic people. And so we've got real work to do. I'm grateful for this moment in American history where people are looking to Black leaders to lead. And I think that we're going to do the right thing. And we're gonna, if we're doing what we're supposed to do, open the doors and extend and let the ladder down for other people to come after us, to also show that all throughout in all communities that Black people can lead quite well.
Thank you, Mandir. Jamal, last minute, bring us on.
I know. It's on us. It's on us to build the country and the planet that we want. It's on us. We don't have any time to blame anyone else, to point the fingers. We have to organize. We have to take advantage of this moment and we have to build and create the country and the world that we want. Because the other side, they are organizing, strategizing, and mobilizing to stop us. So we cannot relax, we cannot rest. We have to build the nation that we want.
Thank you. Thank you, my panel, Summer Lee, Mondaire Jones, Jamal Bowman. This is the biggest, baddest, blackest panel of the summer. So grateful for you. And thank you for the community of NETROOTS Nation. Arshad, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity on behalf of the Working Families Party. So grateful to be in community with you all. And I can't wait for my sister Jessica Byrd and Stacey Abrams to bring down the house. Rashad, back to you.
Thank you, Maurice. And thank you to our esteemed candidates, our elected officials, I should say, for sharing what it looks like when people have the courage to win. So let's keep it going with the Black brilliance on stage. How about? So to win elections, it's not really enough to have good principled candidates. Our movement has to organize people, mobilize voters, and really understand how to build a fairer system. So the two women I'm bringing up next are visionaries in all of these aspects, and I think you know them well. Jessica Byrd is the president and co-founder of 3 Point Strategies and a leader in the Electoral Justice Project at the Movement for Black Lives. And Stacey Abrams has been to NETROOTS Nation in 2014 and 2017. You know her from her run for government, for governor of Georgia, but she leads Fair Fight Vote, which is on the forefront of making sure that our voting is fair and that people who have the ability to make their voices heard. So I'm so happy to be able to bring the two of you up on stage. Hello and welcome.
Thank you. It's so awesome to be here.
Absolutely. Take it away.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Stacey.
Hello.
Hi, my friend. I wish we could be in person having tea on your couch, but this will have to do.
Exactly.
And hello, NETROOTS Nation. Welcome to the first night. Thank you for having us in this conversation. You gave me a chance to talk to my friend, not just about work, but we might have a little fun too. So should we go ahead and get into it, Stacey?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, awesome. Well, the people know you. They do know you. But I feel like you are now known for all things voter suppression, voter protection, mobilization, and a fair fight. But you also have done a lot more. And I wanted to just brag on you a little bit, if that's okay, before we get started. So the awesome part about this conversation is that I've been reflecting a lot about this election cycle as we get into these last 70 or so days. And in 2015, when I started 3 Point Strategies, there was a warm summer day that I was driving back from working on a campaign, and I got a call from you. And you said, why the hell did I learn you started your own firm from somebody else? And I was like, what do you want, Stacey? What can I do for you? And together we worked on the Blue Institute, where you trained over 50 Black and Brown organizers to become campaign managers all throughout the South. You have led as your minority leader in Georgia, where you also continued to flip state house races in your tenure. You lead Fair Fight Action, as well as the Southern Economic Advancement Project. You gave the State of the Union response in 2019. We know that you are a romance novelist. You got Oprah to canvas. And you are one of the baddest, it's true, organizers, strategists, and leaders in this country. And so I just want to start warming us up into our conversation by asking, as you look back on the last 5 years, and we lead into this election day, what are the big thoughts? Like, what did you think that we would be here, where we are inside of this moment? What have you been reflecting on?
Well, first of all, Jessica, thank you for doing this, and thank you to NETROOTS for having me back. You know, when I did not become governor in 2018, part of my responsibility was to think about the work What had I done before I ran? Why did I run? What was my responsibility to my community, to my state, to my people? What was my obligation to my moral core? And the work that I've done, it's been 30 years since I, set up my first voter registration table as a college student at Spelman, almost 30 years, a little bit. I believe in justice. I believe in opportunity. I believe poverty is immoral, but I also believe all of these things are solvable. And my obligation has always been to find a way to fix what I see. And the title is always secondary. The platform is secondary. The responsibility is knowing what you're trying to do. And so in 2015, I'm the Democratic leader, but I'm having conversations with you, with others, about why every person of color I know of in a campaign, with the handful of exceptions we can all name, why they were all field organizers. Why weren't they the campaign managers, the finance directors, the comms directors? Why weren't they running digital shops? And it was the age old, you can't get the job if you don't have experience, and you can't get experience if you don't have the job. And young women like Ashley Robinson and Jeannie Castillo, who worked for me as leader, I said, look, we can do something about this. And they took it on, and we brought you on board to help build it. And it was successful. We got a job for every single person who participated in our program within 40 days. Yes. And that kind of transformation for me is indicative of what's possible if we're willing to scale our vision. But where I am in this moment is that we have to remember that having the vision doesn't mean you get all of the things you see, and that the time it takes to get there may be longer than the time you allocated, and that the way you get there may not be on the road that you laid out for yourself. You may have to take detours, but if you remain fixed on your point and your end point, your pathway doesn't matter as much as your destination matters. And so where we stand in this moment, no one short of Nostradamus could have predicted we'd be in the middle of a global pandemic, an economic collapse, and a racial reckoning. But if our pathway is justice, if our destination is opportunity, if our destination is to solve the evil and the immorality that is poverty, then we are on that path. Because for every moment of degradation and dehumanization and despair, we have these moments of change where we see an electoral system that is starting or continuing to put our voices into the mix. We are in this moment where we can declare what we want, and the scoffing is less than it used to be. And we're in a moment where we can, set our hands to the work. And it doesn't really matter where we start from or what we call ourselves, as long as we remember the work that needs to be done.
Heck yes. So I'm actually really glad that you went there. I have a few questions for you that span a few different topics, because you're one of the most brilliant people I know, if not the most brilliant. And so I want to get a little bit of everything for myself, honestly, and for everyone else. So in 2016, there was this narrative, and I feel like you and I have talked about it a lot, of Black movement is anti-electoral politics. Leftists only want what they want. That folks who didn't get the candidate they wanted in the primary aren't going to vote. We know that that's not true, but we're still inside of that narrative. And we're inside of a freedom summer. We've had a 50-state uprising. We're also reimagining all of our voter contact strategies. And so I kind of have a two-part question. For folks who are reckoning with their place inside of this moment as a voter, as feeling excited, inspired, confident, what would you say to them? And then I want to take that a step further, because I've been arguing with my brothers for the last 2 weeks who are feeling this way as well. What's the script for our families? We're here. We're at NETROOTS. So we're going to figure out how to cast our votes, right? But what are we saying to the ornery brother, the mad cousin, the person who is saying that it's not enough, we haven't gotten far enough, and maybe it just doesn't matter?
So I begin with the frame of how I live my life. My great grandparents were slaves in Mississippi. My great grandparents were sharecroppers. My great grandparents were domestic workers. My grandparents were cooks who worked for 40 years at a college that for half of their tenure their children legally could not attend. My dad is the first man in his family to go to college. My mother was the first person in her family to finish high school. And I have two sisters with PhDs, a brother who's a social worker, a brother who is building his life anew. And I got a sister who's a judge, the first Black woman to be a federal judge. And I stood as the first Black woman for governor for a major party in the history of our country. I believe in progress because I'm the embodiment of what that progress looks like. But I also understand that there were whips for my great-great-grandparents. There were shackles. There were dogs and hoses. There have been these moments that have dehumanized and denied their agency and their humanity and their citizenship. And my obligation is not to bemoan what preceded me, but to ensure it does not repeat itself.
Yes.
And that means I don't elect anyone to save me. Yes. I don't engage in the democratic process because there's someone out there whose magic pill is going to change the world. I do it because I get to shape my world. And in a democratic republic, when you have a representative democracy, the first step we take is to pick the people who speak for us and to fire them if they say the wrong things. And so I vote because it is my right to say you're wrong, or it is my right to say you need to do better. But I also believe in protest, and I've been very frustrated in this moment with this bifurcation that we hear. And I get angry with those who say just vote to those who protest, and those who protest and say voting doesn't matter. You're both wrong. Because protest is how we demand what we need, and it's how we set the vision and make it public. It is how we express the urgency of our needs. Yes. That is what protest does, and it is absolutely necessary. It is the catalyst to change. Absolutely. Voting is protesting at the box. That is how we make protest.
Yes.
Because if you decide that you want X, but you never do anything, I want to live inside a house, but if I'm not willing to pick up a nail and a hammer and a board and start to build it, then I don't get to complain when it's cold and raining on me.
Yeah.
Protest is saying I deserve to live inside this house, but voting is how the house gets built. And it may be a ramshackle little hovel to start, but as we add on boards and add on rooms and build it out, we get to what may have begun as a weak mansion, but eventually it becomes big enough to hold us all. And my responsibility is to say to anyone, I can't, my protest at the ballot box isn't real without your protest in the streets, but your protest in the streets cannot be made real without my work at the ballot box and my work in policy.
Yes, yes. I needed this on my Thursday, yes. And so, I mean, it's a continuum. Folks often act like one stops and the other begins. We're always in process of change. And I feel like you have been such an incredible touchstone for so many of us about what it means to truly set a boundary of what you expect from not only government, but from civic engagement. So a last question here, because I want to even go one layer deeper. You're a planner. And I know that about you personally, but for those of us who've read your book, we know your spreadsheet life, Stacey. We know that you get deep in the spreadsheets, you plan your future, and you take that seriously. So we just talked about like the importance of voting and talking to our families about it and making that plain. But there are those of us who are like, and we still need governance that goes way, way farther. What should we be planning right now? If you had to give advice to folks who are like, actually, this does not go far enough for me, I'm going to vote, that's fine. What would you say we should be doing right now?
Filling out the census. So, and here's why. We think of elections as moments. The other side see elections as opportunities. And they use it as the infrastructure for the power they want to keep. Yeah. We see it as interruptions in our complaint about our power or lack thereof. And when I say we, I mean a collective we who there are those who are constantly engaged, but by and large, we don't see the huge infrastructure. We're so used to living inside, we forget what it takes to build it. And the other side, they know what they're building. They know what they've built. We are watching for the first time in American life, a president tried to dismantle the post office in order to win an election.
That's where I was going next. So this is great.
Well, we never conceived of it. Our assumptions of how low they can go are not low enough. And we think we have excavated all of the diminution of who we are. We have yet to see it, because as we rise in power, we threaten their power. And this is not a community that believes in shared power. And if you don't believe in shared power, then your only answer is to aggregate it and hold it to yourself. And so our vision has to be not only for what we want, but we have to understand what they're willing to do to keep what they've got. And as we are yelling and screaming about the post office, I need people to remember that the 2020 census is going to govern our lives for a decade and set the pathway for a generation, because a 6-year-old who is not counted in the census will not receive a full education in his community because they didn't get the books and the materials they needed. He will not get a school lunch because they undercounted how many kids were poor in that community and needed to be fed. He will not have the roads and bridges that they need to get his parents back and forth to the good jobs they were trying to get. And so they get stuck in those jobs that they barely make ends meet on. They will not get the PPE they need because they don't have a hospital in the community, because the hospital got shut down because they undercounted how many folks lived in that neighborhood. The criminal justice reform dollars that we fought for never get to his community, where the criminals and unfortunately where returning citizens are, because they didn't count who was in that community. And so every step of the way for the next 10 years of his life are going to be underfunded, under-resourced, and it's going to be erased. The census is how we tell the story of who we are. For anybody who pays attention to sports, imagine if the box scores were just made up. You just got to pick which numbers you put in there. That's what happens when we don't participate in the census, when we don't recognize that the instrumentality of our success or failure isn't just what they do, it's what we do. And we cannot overtake them if we abdicate our responsibility, or worse, when we leave the playing field to them. So I need everybody to fill out the census, because if it wasn't that important, they wouldn't be working so hard to end it early, lie about who's in it, and do everything in their power to cement the numbers, because they know if they can do that, they control the House of Representatives for another 10 years. They control your state legislature for another 10 years. And they control that school board that denies that child an education and cements the school to prison pipeline for another generation, because we didn't do our part. So if I want to imagine the future, I begin by filling out the census.
Hell yes. The census is how we tell the story of who we are. So I've already filled out mine, but you just reminded me that I need to get inside my family group chat. And for everybody on here, get in that family group chat. You need to get all your friends from college, but like, ask them if they filled out the census. It does not take long. And one of the bullet points from your incredible resumes, also, you could go to faircount.org and get information about the census. And I feel like y'all know Stacey's always playing chess and not checkers, right? So just get on the board of the 10, 20-year plan of building this space that we need so much. So you name this, and I really want to come back to it because I have this question too. The USPS, this postal service thing, it's kind of confusing. And what's confusing about it is that it's hard to know what the real risk is, right? Like many of us are experiencing it in real time. Our like checks are late, mail that we're sending our grandmothers, folks' medicine is late. So we can tell that something is off. But can you tease it out a little bit? What is the beef with the Postal Service? We thought that this was the thing that like we offer in this country. What's going on? How has it been politicized?
So let's begin with where the Postal Service began.
Okay.
It started with Ben Franklin. So the Postal Service has been around in some form for as long as we have had a country, because we have always understood that the way you knit together a nation is communication. Mm-hmm. And that has been a through line that during Civil War, World War, the Spanish flu, during the Great Recession, the Great Depression, we have never had to sacrifice access to our connectivity because the Postal Service delivers it. But Donald Trump told us 4 years ago what he intended to do. He wants to privatize it. And whenever you hear someone say privatize a public good, what they mean is take it away from those who need it the most. Yeah. When you privatize a public good, that is what you're doing. And you can apply that to any public good you want to think of. It is about denying access to those who can't afford it, because privatization is driven by a profit motive. I am a capitalist. I claim that proudly, but I also understand that there are things government should be doing and things the private sector should be doing, and sometimes never the twain shall meet. And the Postal Service has a very specific function. It is not a profit-making enterprise. It has never been, it should never be. And so starting about a decade ago, the Republican Party started defunding maybe even 15 years ago, by requiring that they pre-fund their pensions. This sounds like, I'm a tax attorney. It sounds deeply boring to most humans. But basically, what they said is, we need you to not pay for what you need to do now. We need you to guess what you need later. And unlike every other federal pension program that we have, you've got to pay for it before you need it. We don't do that for anybody else, or don't require it. So that weakened the economics of the Postal Service. And one of the tricks within the Republican Party is you break it and then you start complaining about why it's broken. So they broke it, and then they started complaining about why it wasn't working the way it should. Well, because you broke it. You set it on fire. Now you're upset because it's burning. Well, then you add the pyromaniac of Donald Trump. And what he did was say, well, it's not burning fast enough, so I'm going to put the arsonist in charge. And that's Louis DeJoy. And what Louis DeJoy is doing, he's a fundraiser for the Republican Party, but more importantly, he's a logistics expert. So he knows what it takes to do things right. And he is intentionally undoing all of the things that have worked. Here's how it applies to mail and to ballots. When you get a mail-in ballot, some states send you a ballot. There are about 7 states that do that, but 42 states will send you an absentee ballot without excuse. But there's a difference in how fast it gets to you, when they send it out, and when it has to be returned. And the biggest issue right now is, when does it have to be returned? There are a number of states that require that it be returned by election day for it to count. Other states require that it be postmarked by election day. And if you've ever paid your taxes by going to the post office at 11:42 p.m. on April 15th, you know that as long as you get to the front counter, they will hit you with that red stamp that says you made it in time, and the IRS needs to leave you alone and back up off you. Well, what they are saying is, for anybody, we are not going to guarantee that you can meet those metrics. We're not going to guarantee that you can get it postmarked, because we may not sort through your mail in time. We may not collect it in time. So one of the rules he's put in place is that you cannot take 2 trips to deliver mail. So if you've got a bunch of mail that needs to go out to a neighborhood, but your truck can only hold X, you used to be able to do your first round and your second round. He has now said it's unlawful to do that, or it's not allowed to do that second round. He has said to postal workers, you don't get to sort the mail in a way that means that absentee ballots get to voters in time, because absentee ballots are typically treated as bulk mail, meaning they pay 20 cents in postage. He's saying, and because you pay bulk mail rates, what that means is that it gets treated like it should. You pay for it like junk mail, but it gets treated like first class mail. And so the post office for years has treated election mail as first class mail, but let them pay junk mail rates because, democracy requires it. Louis DeJoy has said, not now. This time, they either have to pay 55 cents for every piece of mail, or we treat it like junk mail and it stays where it is. And wow. The reason this matters is that the sorting machines that actually divide the kind of mail that reads the codes and says, this is junk mail, this is election mail, this is first class mail, he's removing those machines. He's taken them out of Iowa. He's removed them, and he's systematically removing them so that it's going to take longer to get the mail sorted, which means it's going to take longer to get it delivered, which means it's going to take longer to get it back. And if you're trying to vote in an election where you have to have it returned by the day of the election, and what used to take 3 days now takes 10 or 15, you're going to have tens of thousands of ballots that do not get counted. So here's how we're responding.
I'm like, look, I got my pen out, Stacey. I'm like, tell me, what am I supposed to do about this? Okay.
So we've got the pyromaniac and the arsonist working together to burn down our elections through vote by mail, because COVID-19 is requiring that up to 50% of Americans vote by mail. So here's what we do. Number 1, vote by mail starts in September. So if you go to, and I may be getting ahead of myself, but if you go to fairfight.org, and we can connect you so you can find out when vote by mail starts in your state. And let's be clear, vote by mail, absentee balloting, mail-in ballots, all the same thing. Even if Trump seems confused about it, it's all the same thing. September 4th is the day that North Carolina starts sending out their ballots. So we need everyone to check and find out what day it starts in your state and apply for it as soon as you can. If you can't apply for your ballot yet, put a note on your calendar, do an alert on your phone, but let you know the day you can apply and get your application in. We cannot wait. Election day is not November 3rd. November 3rd is D-Day. Election day is September 4th if you're in North Carolina, and most states start soon thereafter. That's number one. Number two, make certain you have a backup plan. 40 states allow you to vote early in person. If you know your state, if your paycheck hasn't shown up and that letter your mama said she sent to you hasn't shown up, then you need to assume that you're in one of those hot zones where they're trying to stop you from getting your mail. If you go to the same website, go to fairfight.org, we will tell you, you can click and we'll get you through to a group that will tell you when early voting starts. And 40 states let you vote early. Those are the two ways. Number three, if you get your absentee ballot, the minute you receive it, not your application, but the minute you get your ballot, you need to find out if your state has drop boxes. That means you don't get to put it in the mail to send it back because you can't trust that, but you can drive to a box, usually it's a public library, or if they're banks or whatever, or the elections place, and you can drop it in. But that's how we do it. We need to make certain that they can't steal it by getting there faster than the flames can reach us.
My goodness. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to remember Louis DeJoy. I've obviously read a lot about it, but I'm writing that name down. We're going to check on our vote by mail status. It starts in September, but we need a plan for the day that it starts. That also means we need a backup plan, part two. And that means we all need to be supporting our families, our communities inside of our political homes. Do not make assumptions that everyone has the right information. And then check on whether or not they have drop boxes. Did I get it all?
That's it.
All right. So we have like 2 more minutes. And so I wanted to try to get in one additional question. You built a badass team. And actually, this is one of your genius points that a lot of folks get to experience when they work with you, but many people don't know. One of your secrets is that you know how to build a squad, raise up people of color leaders, hire us, uplift us, etc. For all the weary staffers out there, for the folks who are inside of the 15, 17, 18-hour days, who are looking for the North Star, where is that part for you as a leader when you knew your org, your team, the squad you assembled was going to win? And how do you push through those intense moments when it feels like everything is hard and everybody's yelling at you and you don't have enough answers or enough resources, but you feel connected? Tell us about that teamness that you always get right.
Well, before I do that, I'm going to tell you, I need to correct myself. It's fairfight.com, not fairfight.org. So I don't want anybody to go to the wrong place. Fairfight.com.
Fairfight.com.
So I never assume I'm going to win. I never believe when you're in this fight, there is no moment where, the Avengers are victors and all of the villains are vanquished. It doesn't happen. It's a question of who wins that battle, but you got to remember that we are constantly in a war. And when you think about it as a war versus a battle, then it's not about will you win everything, it's can you advance? Can you survive? Can you get to the next moment? And leadership and camaraderie and building teams is about making sure everyone can make it to that next stop, that they can make it to that next moment. Because if you lie and say that there's this end date for what we do, then people exhaust themselves trying to get there. And the best leadership tells them to pace themselves, recognizing that there are going to be peaks and valleys in what has to be demanded of you. And sometimes those peaks last longer than you thought, and those valleys are deeper than you could have imagined. Yes. But the leadership and the friendship is about being present in both places and doing your best to level them out, so that it's that when you take on yourself, you are helping take on the energies that are too high at the peaks and too low at the valleys. And it's creating teams where people are willing to step in when they see the peaks are getting too high, and they're willing to climb up there and bring the oxygen. And the folks who remind folks we need to level out because we're getting away from ourselves. But it's also about having those who will go into the valley to find you when you are parched and you are done, and they revive you. And so it's less about these moments, these sort of dramatic moments of victory and loss, and more about how do we sustain and endure, and how do we remember why we started in the first place. And what I try to do is model my belief that that is what we're doing by having plans, by laying out, here's the long-term opportunity, here are the things we're going to face along the way, and there are 15 things I cannot think of that they are going to do that make no sense at all. Yeah. But we've got to be ready for those too. Lauren, who we both love, calls it Scenario Z. I start my planning at Scenario Z. Scenario A is like, that's like, yay. Scenario F, you can make it what you need it to be. When you get into Scenario N, you're kind of like, what? But I start with Scenario Z, because when you plan to serve your people in Scenario Z, then you build infrastructure, you build kindness, you build respite, but you also build forgiveness. And those are the pieces that help you get through Scenario Z, which is where we spend too much of our time in these battles.
Thank you for that. Wow. Thank you for that. And I have the job of bringing us to a close. And because I probably won't see you until after we win in November, I just wanted to love on you real quick for 30 seconds, and don't hate me, okay? Just want to love on you real quick. So I'm
giving you very strong side eye right now.
I know,
it may not come through Zoom effectively, but this is my version. So,
so I got to be in that Scenario Z with you as the Abrams for Governor Chief of Staff in 2018. And in those trenches where you brought protests to the polls, okay, after, Adrienne Maree Brown, one of the Movement for Black Lives facilitators, wrote you a little love letter. And I'm just going to give you a quick snippet of it, because I want to add the 2020 version. Adrienne Maree Brown, author of Emergent Strategy, for those of you who follow, said this: "Dear Stacey, don't give in. We know you won. We feel it. You are real and you love us. You won us. Every Georgian I know voted for you, and we all plan to vote for you again one day. Please don't give in. Even if you can't get light into every shadow of this race, even if you are told to concede, even if they try to complete the story, you ain't finished yet. You are a love scholar, a romance novelist. This is a love story. We see who you are and we love you. We're staying. We won't give in. Love, Adrienne Maree Brown and everybody I know, on November 7th, 2018. And so I want to say, dear Stacey Abrams, my good friend, and really a North Star to many of us in the progressive space, don't give in. We love you. For all of the hundreds of staff you'll promote, hire, mentor, coach, for the millions of voters you'll protect, for the Black girl political firms that you'll invest in, for all of the paths that you pave, even when another part of the road is added at the end. For every single one of us who look to you to not concede, we want to say thank you. Don't give in. Feel us at your back. Every single day that you say yes to us, we will say yes to you. And you can feel me at your side and at the yes every single day. So with that, I just wanted to say we love you. We know the battle that you are inside for us. We know that you're navigating for so many of us. You're all things voter protection, but you are so, so much more. And we thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Netroots. Thank you all. And just let's get it done.
Let's get it done. Good night, Netroots. Have an amazing conference.
Thank you.